Well, I wanted to, with that and knowing that, I'd love to talk about some of your portfolio companies. We'd love to go through all of them, but I don't think we have enough time. But
Right.
maybe you could share with us, some of the most recent investments that you've made, and maybe something that revolves around your investment thesis that we were talking about earlier.
Sure. Yeah. So, as I mentioned to you, we've kind of expanded our definition of healthcare in the last 12 months. So I'll highlight a few of those that are outside the normal purview of health IT investing. And then I can also come back to a couple of health IT deals that we've done recently that we really like. So in the environmental analytics space, our first investment outside of traditional healthcare was a company called Aclima, which provides hyperlocal block by block air quality data using mobile sensors, proprietary mobile sensors. For us, that was actually a really important investment because number one, it took us outside of traditional health IT investing and traditional healthcare investing. But it really kind of underscored for me the value and the importance of environmental determinants as it relates to health outcomes. And so if you look at the correlation between air quality and chronic illness, it's there. I mean, it's undeniable. And if you look at the air quality in any given large city and the type of population that lives in the neighborhoods with the poorest air quality, it tends to be our most vulnerable population. So it touches on a lot of themes that we've already addressed here, which is, the underserved population tends to have worse health outcomes. It's because not only do they not have the proper access to healthcare, but they also happen to live in an environment that actually leads to worse health outcomes to begin with. And I think COVID has very much illustrated that. And so that's Aclima. That was the first one we did outside of the space. The second one, which is even more unique, is a company called Footprint. They're a material science company. They offer up packaging for food companies that is completely biodegradable, compostable, and marine soluble. So this is packaging that can actually hold food and liquids for far longer than typical biodegradable products, and is being used by companies such as ConAgra, Tyson Foods, Beyond Meats. And really, it's hugely important for us because it addresses the PFAS and forever chemicals crisis that's taking place in our drinking supply right now. I mean, I think the stat is, we're consuming an average of 1 credit card worth of plastic, every couple of weeks through reheating containers that have plastic linings, or through our actual water supply itself. And there's a strong correlation between PFAS, forever chemicals, and chronic illness. And so once again, we're taking much more of a macro approach and addressing something that's impacting the entire population. And that's why, we're extremely excited to be investors in Footprint. And that company is doing incredibly well. I mean, they have huge contracts with a lot of large CPG companies. And once again, it's representative of kind of our more global view of healthcare. Bringing it back to digital health, our two most recent investments, I think, illustrate some of the characteristics that I was looking for in our companies. The most recent one we made was in a company called Watershed Health, which is actually it's a care continuity platform in the post-acute space. It's a kind of a mix between interoperability and care management for patients who are being discharged from the hospital and being sent out either to post-acute care settings or basically going home for additional home care. What you end up seeing with this population historically is that once they leave the hospital, the health system has no idea what happened to them. I mean, did they even show up to the post-acute care facility? We're not totally sure. If they do go home, did they receive care at home? And a lot of times, the only way you find out what happened to that patient is when they get readmitted back into the hospital. And if you look at the amount that payers are on the hook for as it relates to readmissions, I mean, they are, I think 30% of their overall budget is to handle readmissions, if I remember that statistic correctly. I mean, it's a massive amount of dollars that are wasted because we don't properly take care of patients once we discharge them from the hospital. So this company basically allows complete visibility into where the patients go. It allows the health system to track that patient once they leave the hospital, whether they go home or they go to a post-acute care setting. And so it's a combination of interoperability and care management. And they've been very successful at lowering readmission rates with their clients. So that was the most recent one. Previously, we invested in a company called BeWell, which is a care navigation solution. And I mentioned to you before that we tend to like platform businesses as opposed to point solutions. The way I would describe BeWell is that it's an accumulation of probably 6 to 8 point solutions, and it integrates them all really, really well. And it's basically the digital front door between the payer and the member. It's a digital front door between the provider and their patient. And it's a digital front door between the employer and the employee. It sells to multiple stakeholders, but it's a one-stop shop for the patient to manage their entire healthcare from the clinical side in terms of finding a physician, following up with that physician, and interacting with that physician, on a post-visit basis. It allows you to keep track of your deductibles, of your benefits. So it allows you to kind of manage the relationship between the payer and the patient and the member. And of course, it allows employers to basically offer a solution up to employees that can help them better manage their overall care. And so if you look at it on the front end, there are a lot of really interesting point solutions that are aggregated into this unified platform. But the real secret sauce of that company is on the back end. It's the interoperability. Once again, it's the stuff that people don't see, which is how do you aggregate all these siloed data sources in a way that's seamless on the back end, in a way that you can actually generate actionable guidance for that member or for that patient. And so once again, both of these are solutions that aren't necessarily the flashiest solutions out there, but they're hugely important. And the amount of horsepower it's required for them to actually do what they do in the back end is actually quite immense. It's a little misleading. And for that reason, we like both of these solutions, because once you get the interoperability piece correct on the back end, you can do a lot of things on the front end. I mean, you can basically take that solution in a number of different directions in a way that it could continue to be effective as it relates to improving health outcomes.
Really interesting. Exciting. I mean, I think it gives a good recap of what we were talking about earlier with is your holistic focus on healthcare and looking at, for example, environmental factors. A credit card a week, that freaks me out.
No one likes to hear that. No one likes to hear that statistic.